In a mansion worth millions, behind marble floors and sparkling chandeliers, a hidden cruelty was taking place, one no one could imagine. A little girl, barely 11, trembling on cold tiles, was being forced to scrub the floors with her bare hands. Her tears left tiny trails across the gleaming marble, but no one came to help, except for a single witness, a man who thought he knew everything about his own home. The woman he loved, the wife he trusted, was showing a side he had never seen, a darkness that made his blood run cold. And the reason? Something so small, so innocent, yet enough to ignite years of hatred and humiliation. What would you do if the person you trusted most in your life was the one causing the deepest pain? Today, you're about to see a story that will shock, anger, and make you question the very meaning of justice. Michael Harrington was a man who had spent his life building an empire. At 47, he was already a titan in the world of real estate, his portfolio worth nearly $450 million. To most people, he seemed untouchable, confident, meticulous, and composed. His days began early with a ritualistic precision, calls with executives, meetings with architects, and property inspections that often lasted hours. Yet despite the dizzying pace of his professional life, Michael's home was his sanctuary, a place where he could slow down, breathe, and, above all, trust that the people around him were who they appeared to be. His wife, Cassandra, was the public image of perfection. On the outside, she was glamorous, charitable, and endlessly supportive. At galas, fundraisers, and society events, she smiled, made speeches, and posed for photographs with elegance and grace. Everyone who met her assumed she was kind-hearted and genuine, the kind of woman who could never imagine causing harm. To Michael, she was the embodiment of sophistication and warmth, a partner who seemed to balance his intensity with her own calm, magnetic presence. Their household was equally refined. The Harrington estate was a sprawling property in a quiet Boston suburb, its halls filled with expensive art, polished wood, and the soft hum of hidden conveniences. Marble floors gleamed under the sunlight streaming through massive windows, and each room was meticulously arranged to reflect wealth and taste. The staff who managed the property were few but skilled, moving quietly, performing their duties without fanfare, and ensuring that the family's life ran seamlessly. Among them was Rosa, the housekeeper, who had been with the Harringtons for 6 years. She was efficient, loyal, and dependable, and she took her work seriously, not just as a job but as a responsibility to the children she cared for and the household she helped sustain. Rosa's daughter, Sophia, was 11 years old, a bright and curious girl with a gentle demeanor. She loved to read, to draw, and to ask endless questions about the world around her. She often followed her mother around, learning small chores and absorbing lessons about responsibility, respect, and integrity. Michael had seen her many times, always polite and attentive, but in the backdrop of his hectic life, she was just one of the many people whose quiet presence went largely unnoticed. On the surface, life seemed flawless. Michael managed his empire with a steady hand. Cassandra shone in society's spotlight, and the household operated like a well-oiled machine. Yet beneath the veneer of luxury, a pattern was beginning to form, one that Michael had not yet noticed. There were small things. The way Cassandra's smile sometimes faltered when Sophia entered a room, the occasional sharpness in her tone when addressing Rosa, the quiet tension that seemed to ripple through moments that should have been ordinary. He dismissed these signs, attributing them to the stress of social obligations or the pressures of running a high-profile household. Michael had never considered that cruelty could hide behind charm, that the people closest to him could harbor dark impulses. He had been raised to respect others, a lesson instilled by his late grandmother, Eleanor, who had worked as a domestic worker herself. Eleanor's life had been defined by hard labor, resilience, and dignity in the face of hardship. She often told young Michael, "Money can't buy a good heart. If you ever have power, use it to protect those who can't protect themselves." He remembered her words, tucked them away in the corners of his mind, but in the busy rhythm of life, they remained a distant echo rather than a guiding principle. Until that afternoon, Michael had returned home earlier than planned, a rare occurrence that would alter the trajectory of everything he had known. He entered the house quietly, expecting the familiar sounds of domestic life. Rosa bustling in the kitchen, Cassandra perhaps in the sitting room, preparing for an upcoming event. But instead, he was drawn toward the marble bathroom by an odd silence, punctuated only by muffled sounds of distress. There, he saw something that froze him in place. Cassandra, poised and commanding even in the private space of her own home, was towering over Sophia. The little girl was on the cold, gleaming floor, hands pressed against the tiles as if bracing herself for pain. Her small frame trembled, and tears streaked down her cheeks. Cassandra's words, sharp and deliberate, cut through the silence. "Children like you need to learn their place." Michael's mind reeled. He had never witnessed this side of his wife. In that instant, memories of Eleanor's teachings surged forward, the stories of humiliation, of quiet suffering endured in silence, of lives shaped by the cruelty of those who wielded power thoughtlessly. The connection was immediate and chilling. History was repeating itself in his own home. That fleeting moment set the stage for a revelation that would shake his world. Michael realized that the life he had meticulously built, the people he had trusted, and the household he had carefully orchestrated were not as they seemed. Beneath the polished surface lay a hidden pattern of control and cruelty, one that would soon demand exposure. What he did next would not just change his family. It would redefine justice, loyalty, and courage in ways that no one could anticipate. The image of Cassandra standing over Sophia haunted Michael long after that first shocking discovery. For days, he carried it like a secret wound, unable to shake the sound of his wife's cold words. Every time he looked at Cassandra, he tried to reconcile the woman he had married, the poised socialite, the dazzling hostess, with the merciless figure he had caught humiliating a child. But Michael was a man of reason. He needed more than a single moment to believe the truth. And so he watched. At first, he hoped it had been a terrible misunderstanding. Maybe Cassandra had snapped in a moment of frustration. Maybe Sophia had been caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. But when he paid closer attention, subtle cracks began to widen into unmistakable patterns. Cassandra's smiles toward Rosa and her daughter always seemed sharper now, edged with something false. The little girl's shoulders tightened whenever Cassandra entered the room. And Rosa, loyal, hardworking Rosa, seemed too quick to steer Sophia away, too eager to keep her daughter out of sight. The unease gnawed at him. Michael's grandmother, Eleanor, had always told him to trust his instincts. "Cruelty leaves traces," she used to say. "Look for the silence, the shrinking eyes, the way someone avoids a room." And here it was playing out in his own house. One morning, when Cassandra left for a luncheon, Michael took a step that felt both invasive and necessary. He called a discreet security company and had hidden cameras installed in parts of the house. Small, almost invisible devices tucked into corners and shelves. He told himself it was for peace of mind, that perhaps nothing would happen, and he could move on. But a deep part of him already knew what he was about to uncover. The footage left no doubt. At exactly 10:05 a.m., almost every day, Rosa would leave for errands. And the moment she stepped out, Cassandra's mask would fall. The recordings showed her assigning Sophia impossible tasks, reorganizing the family library, then undoing it again, polishing windows that already sparkled, sweeping leaves outside while the wind undid her work in seconds. And all the while, Cassandra's voice was sharp, filled with disdain. "Girls like you should never forget where you belong," she would sneer. Sophia's small body bent and strained, her face a mask of silent endurance. Tears often welled in her eyes, but she carried out every task, too frightened to disobey. Michael's chest tightened every time he watched. He saw his wife not as a socialite or partner, but as a tormentor methodically breaking down a child's spirit. The worst came when Cassandra forced Sophia to clean up shards of a broken vase with her bare hands. Michael clenched his fists as he replayed the clip, every movement of the girl's tiny fingers against jagged glass a reminder of his grandmother's warnings. This wasn't an outburst. This was calculated cruelty. Still, Michael wanted undeniable proof that Cassandra's actions weren't isolated. One afternoon, searching through drawers in her study, he stumbled across old letters addressed to a friend named Marianne. The words chilled him to the bone. Cassandra confessed that having a child like Sophia in her home made her sick to her stomach, and that humiliating her gave a strange sense of satisfaction. This wasn't stress. It wasn't a lapse in judgment. It was intent. But Cassandra's darkness ran even deeper. Michael's suspicions grew when Rosa casually mentioned that other families had dismissed Cassandra's friends for being difficult with staff. Wanting clarity, Michael turned to Daniel Rivers, a private investigator known for his quiet effectiveness in Boston's elite circles. Daniel was skeptical at first. Cases of abuse in wealthy households often died in whispers, but once Michael handed him the letters and recordings, he dug deeper. What Daniel discovered made Michael's stomach turn. Cassandra was part of an online group called Guardians of Heritage. The women there, many of them wives of influential men, traded strategies for keeping domestic workers and their children in their place. It was a secret community of entitlement, a twisted echo of historical injustices disguised as modern elitism. Daniel unearthed more. Testimonies from staff in other households where Cassandra had bullied, manipulated, and demeaned employees. Some said she had even convinced others to join her methods. The network was wider, uglier, and more dangerous than Michael had imagined. Every new piece of evidence tightened the noose. Michael realized his wife wasn't just cruel. She was proud of it, part of a system that thrived on power and humiliation. His anger was no longer just personal. It was generational. His grandmother's face flashed before him, her quiet dignity forged through years of silent suffering. And now Sophia was reliving that same cycle under his roof. Michael could no longer stay silent. But how? To expose Cassandra meant tearing apart the image of perfection that shielded his family in Boston's high society. It meant dragging private pain into public light. It meant risking everything. The opportunity came sooner than he expected. Cassandra's annual spring charity gala was approaching. Her crowning jewel, the night when Boston's elite gathered under glittering chandeliers to hear her preach about empowering underprivileged children. The hypocrisy was unbearable. Michael knew this was where her mask had to shatter. He began to plan. He worked with Daniel to collect more testimonies, to preserve every recording, every letter, every digital footprint of Cassandra's cruelty. He rehearsed in his mind how he would reveal it, when he would step forward, how the crowd would react. The night of the gala loomed closer, and Michael's resolve hardened. Each time he passed Sophia in the hallway, her eyes lowered in fear, and he felt his determination surge. Each time Rosa smiled politely, unaware of the storm building, he reminded himself of Eleanor's words, "If you ever have power, use it to protect those who can't protect themselves." The question wasn't if he would act. It was how far he was willing to go. And as the glittering night approached, one thought consumed him. When the lights dimmed and the crowd hushed, the truth would finally explode into the open. The night of the charity gala arrived, and the Grand Belmont Hotel glistened like a cathedral of wealth. Chandeliers dripped with crystals, music floated gently through the ballroom, and the air buzzed with conversation from Boston's most powerful. More than 400 people filled the hall, politicians, philanthropists, business leaders, and reporters, all waiting to be dazzled by Cassandra Harrington, the woman who seemed to embody compassion and elegance. Michael stood at the edge of the room, his heart pounding, eyes fixed on the stage. He had rehearsed this moment countless times, but now that it was here, his body felt heavy, almost trembling. In his hand, he carried a small remote that would decide the night. With one press, the perfect illusion his wife had built would fracture in front of everyone. Cassandra swept onto the stage in a glittering silver gown, her smile flawless under the lights. She began her speech, her voice smooth, filled with false warmth. Tonight, we gather to empower underprivileged children, to restore their dignity, to remind them that they too belong in this world. The words echoed like poison to Michael, each sentence twisting into hypocrisy. He thought of Sophia's trembling hands, her tears on the marble floor, her small voice choking back fear. He thought of his grandmother, Eleanor's warnings about cruelty hiding behind wealth. The crowd listened, entranced, unaware of the monster standing before them. And then Michael stepped forward. The sudden scrape of the microphone caught the audience's attention. Cassandra turned, startled, her polished smile flickering for the first time. Michael's voice cut through the hall. Before we celebrate, let's watch something real. The lights dimmed. A massive screen flickered to life behind Cassandra. At first, the crowd murmured in confusion. And then they saw it. Cassandra's face, distorted with cruelty, barking orders at an 11-year-old girl. The footage showed Sophia scrubbing spotless tiles, wiping mirrors already gleaming, sweeping leaves as Cassandra sneered. "Girls like you should never forget where you belong." Gasps rippled through the room. Some covered their mouths. Others turned to Cassandra in disbelief. The video rolled on. Cassandra, laughing on the phone, was describing how she was breaking the spirit of a child. Cassandra is forcing Sophia to clean shattered glass with her bare hands. Cassandra, towering over her like a predator savoring the fear of its prey. The ballroom, moments earlier alive with chatter, fell silent. Reporters fumbled for cameras. Guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The image of the glamorous hostess, the charitable socialite, was collapsing in real time. Cassandra's face drained of color. She rushed to the podium, fumbling for the microphone. "This is a mistake. These are lies." But before she could finish, Daniel Rivers stepped onto the stage, his voice calm but commanding. "No, Mrs. Harrington, these are not lies. These are patterns." He revealed the letters Cassandra had written, admitting her satisfaction in humiliating Sophia. Screenshots of the online group Guardians of Heritage appeared next, messages where Cassandra and others boasted about controlling and demeaning domestic workers. One by one, the pieces of evidence mounted, stripping away every layer of her carefully crafted persona. Cassandra tried to move toward the exit, but Michael intercepted her. His voice, steady and unflinching, carried across the hall. "Your empire of lies ends tonight. Divorce papers were filed yesterday, and the Attorney General's office has already opened an investigation." The words landed like thunder. The crowd erupted, some in outrage, others in stunned silence. Cassandra's hands trembled. For the first time in years, she was powerless. Her status, her reputation, her very identity crumbled under the weight of truth. She collapsed into a chair, her glittering gown suddenly looking more like a costume than a crown. Michael turned back to the audience, his voice firm, his purpose clear. "Behind every mask of wealth and charm, there can be cruelty we choose not to see. Tonight, I refuse to remain silent." And then, as if to reclaim the dignity that Cassandra had stolen, Michael invited Rosa and Sophia onto the stage. The little girl, shy but brave, stepped into the spotlight. The same ballroom that had once echoed with Cassandra's empty promises now erupted into a standing ovation for the child who had endured so much. Reporters scribbled furiously, cameras flashed, and whispers filled the air. Cassandra's empire had shattered in front of the very people she had spent her life trying to impress. Michael looked at Sophia, standing tall despite her fear, and thought of Eleanor's words. This was the turning point. This was where the cycle of cruelty ended. The gala had been meant to elevate Cassandra's image. Instead, It became the night she was unmasked, her power ripped away, and a little girl's voice finally heard. But what happened after, the fallout, the justice, the lives forever changed, would be even more powerful than this public reckoning. The days that followed the gala were unlike anything Boston's elite had seen before. Cassandra's downfall was immediate and merciless. Headlines blared her name, not as a symbol of glamour, but as a public disgrace. The once celebrated hostess was suddenly the face of cruelty and hypocrisy, her carefully polished image destroyed in the span of one night. Friends who had once fought for her attention now avoided her entirely. Her invitations went unanswered, her phone calls ignored. The glittering world she had built around herself collapsed like fragile glass. The Attorney General's office opened a formal investigation into child abuse and harassment. Cassandra, stripped of her reputation and influence, was forced to retreat into a modest apartment, far from the mansions and ballrooms that had once been her kingdom. For someone who had thrived on control and status, the isolation was devastating. But while Cassandra's world shrank, another life began to expand. Rosa, who had endured years of silence and loyalty, found herself standing in a new position of dignity. Michael appointed her director of residential operations at Harrington Properties, with a salary and benefits that gave her the stability she had never known. For the first time in her life, Rosa could provide for her daughter without fear of scarcity. She carried herself with pride, shoulders no longer stooped under the weight of servitude. And Sophia, once the frightened girl forced to scrub marble floors, began to flourish. Michael announced on the night of the gala that she would receive a full scholarship to Hawthorne Academy, one of the city's most prestigious schools. Within months, Sophia's transformation was undeniable. The shy child who had lowered her eyes in fear now walked the hallways with confidence. She excelled academically, but more importantly, she found her voice. Sophia started leading anti-bullying campaigns, standing in front of her peers to remind them that dignity was not a privilege. It was a right. Michael watched her grow and felt Eleanor's presence in every step. His grandmother's words, "If you ever have power, use it to protect those who can't protect themselves," had finally taken root. He had honored her memory not by building wealth, but by breaking a cycle of cruelty that had plagued generations. Yet beyond the Harrington estate, the impact rippled wider. The exposure of the Guardians of Heritage Group triggered a federal investigation. What had once been a hidden network of wealthy women normalizing abuse was dismantled piece by piece. Other workers came forward, emboldened by Michael's stand. Testimonies poured in, stories of humiliation, of withheld wages, of children treated as burdens rather than human beings. For the first time, voices long silenced were being heard. And in that, there was a larger truth. This wasn't just about one family, one child, or one cruel woman. It was about a system of prejudice that had survived in shadows, hiding behind wealth and respectability. Cassandra was only one face of a much deeper injustice. Her exposure reminded everyone that racism and classism don't always wear obvious masks. Sometimes, they hide in polished smiles, in elegant speeches, in the quiet spaces of homes where no one is watching. For Michael, the lesson was both personal and universal. He had once believed his empire defined him, that success was measured in millions and square footage. But the moment he chose to protect Sophia, he discovered that true legacy is measured not in wealth, but in courage. And so, the story closes not with the collapse of one woman, but with the rise of a young girl who refused to be broken. Sophia's journey from cold marble floors to standing ovations was more than just a personal victory. It was a symbol of what happens when silence is broken, when someone chooses to act, when justice is no longer postponed. But as you listen to her story, ask yourself, how many Sophias still suffer unseen? How many children are silenced by fear? How many voices are buried beneath the weight of power? And more importantly, what role will you play when faced with injustice? Because justice does not begin in courtrooms or headlines. It begins in the choices we make in the quiet moments, when no one is watching. It begins with the courage to say, "This is wrong," even when it costs us. Michael Harrington chose to break the silence. His choice changed the life of a child, shattered a system of cruelty, and left behind a legacy far greater than his fortune. The question now is, when the moment comes, will you do the same? Sophia's journey from humiliation to hope is more than just one child's story. It's a reminder of the hidden injustices that still exist today. What did you feel when you saw Cassandra's mask finally fall? Do you believe Michael did enough, or could he have done more? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story.